presentation, so I'm using Camtasia to record everything. But anyway, this morning's session is about running hydraulic and pneumatic tubing and hose with SolidWorks Electrical. General housekeeping, the webinar control panel that should be on your upper right hand corner, and there's a red arrow that's to expand and collapse the control panel. Now the control panel is, or the web go-to meeting has been changed over the years. The control panel does look a little bit different, but anyway, this is where you'll ask your questions, and I do ask that you ask your questions at the very end of the presentation. So SolidWorks Electrical, you probably don't know much about SolidWorks Electrical. There's two sides of SolidWorks Electrical. There's the SolidWorks Electrical Schematic, and the Schematic gives you the ability to draw schematics. We have different types of schematics. We have a single line diagram. Single line diagram is kind of a managerial view of the electrical project, to where it's basically symbols, have pictures in there to identify what the project is about. So anybody can basically read this type of schematic. As you can see, we got some push buttons here to go to the PLC. The PLC would then go to the motor starter that's going to go through a terminal strip to start motors and turn them off, etc. Then we also have the schematic itself. The schematic itself is the details behind the electrical project, the wiring, what wire goes to what terminal on what component. Then we also have the ability to create ladder logic for the PLCs. And this is in the 2D, or the SolidWorks Electrical Schematic package. And then we have the 3D side of things. The 3D side of things is, of course, an add-in for SolidWorks. And this is where you actually do the physical wiring. You add your components to your assemblies, and then you route wires and cables and harnesses. And then your harnesses, you can then flatten them out. And there's communication. There's actually a SQL database behind everything. The SQL database contains information about the schematics, including the symbols. The symbols will have components associated with them. The components will have SolidWorks models associated to them. So it communicates from the electrical side or the schematic side to the 3D side. And it's also bidirectional. So for example, if you delete a component in SolidWorks Electrical, that component is on a schematic, it will delete that component off the schematic. So it is bidirectional. There's also where you can bundle the two together, so you can buy them separate. So you can buy electrical only. You can buy electrical 3D only. But you really can't run electrical 3D only because it needs intelligence from the schematic side. And then you can also bundle those two together and get a discount on the price if you purchase SolidWorks Electrical Professional. Now there are some limitations on the Professional bundle in that you cannot separate them. You cannot run the schematic part of Professional on one computer and the electrical 3D on another computer. They have to be on the same computer. So you can't run both of them at the same time on different computers. Now SolidWorks Electrical is not really built for hydraulic and pneumatic, but you can run hydraulic and pneumatic. Of course, there's not a lot of difference between a symbol as a symbol in electrical, whether it's an electrical symbol or a hydraulic symbol. The symbols are in effect just blocks If you're familiar with AutoCAD, it's just DWG blocks. So you have attributes in those. Attributes is pulling information from that SQL database to fill in the information about that particular symbol when you add it to a drawing. And again, it doesn't really matter whether it's electrical or hydraulic. A symbol is a symbol. And then on the schematic side, of course, where you're routing wires, typically you'd route wires on the electrical side between components. Here, you can also, when you draw a line, you can tell it, well, this line is not representing a wire or a cable. It's representing hydraulic tube or hose or whatever. Or it could also be a pneumatic group. So basically, you can tell it what to do, what that line is representing, and that line could represent a wire or it can represent a hose. Doesn't really matter in electrical. And then on the 3D side, it doesn't really matter whether that fitting is a hose fitting or a connector on the end of a wire. So I'm going to go into the detail, go into the demo a little bit, show you a little bit about it. And we'll get into the 2D side, or excuse me. Dang it. Well, I'll just launch it from the bar. So here's the 2D side, and here's just a rough schematic. So here's a list of, this is a project. So basically electrical is stored in projects. Here's a drawing, here's a schematic drawing. This happens to be a hydraulic schematic. And if I go to my components tab, here's my components. So I've got a hydraulic cylinder. I got a hydraulic valve, a 4-port 3-way valve. I've got a pump and a filter here. Need to add a tank to this. But also before I get into that, I'll just get in a little bit more information. So basically here's the, expand out my hydraulic cylinder. Here's my cylinder. If this were a real complex schematic, I could right click on it and go to, and it'll jump to that particular schematic or that part in the schematic. The fitting. So here's a U1 fitting. And that U1 fitting is going to the blind end of the port. I can look at the properties of this fitting, and I can see that fitting is pneumatic and hydraulic. If I go to my manufacturer part tab, here is the part in the database that's associated to that particular symbol. And with this all being in the database, then I can export reports being bills of materials and things of that nature. So there's my U1 fitting is going to the blind end on the cylinder, and U2 is for the rod end of the cylinder, also the valve itself. So here's my valve, and I got a U1 fitting. So basically I've got a hose going from U1 on the valve to U1 on the cylinder. So let's get into actually doing the schematic itself. I don't have a symbol for my hydraulic tank, so what I'll do, I'll just use a black box for that and just draw a rectangle and just pick 2 corners of the rectangle. And now I need to give that symbol some properties. I need to give it a mark, and I'll just call it a tank, and use the default instance. So if I had another tank in here, then it would be tank 2. I need to associate a manufactured part to this symbol, And I know I don't have one in the database, so I'll just add one here, and we'll call this a tank. More information about it so that we could easily search for it. XYZ is the manufacturer of this tank, and fill out a description, maybe 64 OZ 60-ounce reservoir or half gallon. And do I want to add this manufactured part to my system database or just for this project? I'll just do it just for this project. I'm not going to need it again. So there's my tank. And now I can do my routing to this. So I can use my single line and go to my wire manager, clicking on the button there, and so here's my electrical wires, and here's my hydraulic wires, well, lines representing hydraulic, hose, tube, etc. And there's for pneumatic. And I could also go to my manager, and this is where I could add additional wire types. And when I say wires, again, I mean wires, hose, pipe, tube, etc. And here's my return line. If I right click on it and go to properties, here's the properties about it. So this is a hydraulic. Diameter of this is going to be 14 millimeters. I could also put in a minimum bend radius for this hose. So anyway, I want to draw in a return wire. So I'll just select it, and you can see that I'm going to run a return line going from here to there. And now I need to run my power line. So I'll use the work one here. Again, it's under the hydraulic. And draw to there. And draw across there. And back to there. And notice there's some intelligence in this. So if I escape out of the command, you can see where it automatically trimmed it back around the filter. And if I go to the properties of this, wire style properties, there's where it is. It's a hydraulic, the 19 millimeter diameter, and this one does have a bend radius of 2 times the diameter, excuse me. So that's basically how you build it up on the 2D side. And now I'm going to go to SolidWorks itself and show a little bit of the 3D side. And I'm going to open up my project manager. This is where I have access to the different projects. And here's the project that I have. It is in red because that's signifying that somebody else has this project open, so we can have multiple people working on the same project at the same time. And again, the warning. Let me get this out of the way a little bit. And I'm going to go ahead and keep that push pin in. And here's all the documents in this project. And look like I didn't refresh the schematic. But if I go to my 2D side of things, and I'll just save it to the database. And now if I open up the hydraulic project, you can see the additional stuff in it. But anyway, let's open up the SolidWorks assembly. and it'll take a few seconds to open up the assembly. But anyway, there is some communication between the two, the 2D side and the 3D side. The 2D has all the intelligence, so like I said before, you cannot do the 3D without the 2D. And I'm going to go to a view to where I'm zoomed in. So basically here's the two components, or the two ports on the cylinder, and I'm going to use this third valve there. So now that I'm inside of SolidWorks Electrical, inside of SolidWorks, it has added, that you've already seen before in my task pane, access to the projects, and also it's added another tab in our command manager to get the component to the electrical component, excuse me, so it's easier to find your electrical components here. So that component, the cylinder was C4. Here's my U1 fitting. If I expand that out, here's the physical SolidWorks part for that. If I right click, insert, and I'll just snap it into position with the Smart Mates. And now you can see that it's got a check in front of it. That means it's actually in the assembly. And the U2 goes on the other end. So I'll just insert it on that one. And now if I go to my V4 U1 here, insert that fitting into this third valve, and put the U2 in on the other port. And now these fittings have coincident and concentric mates, so they're still allowed to rotate. And let's kind of reposition these so I'll get a better job of routing to begin with. And turn that one maybe just like that. So go to my command manager, the electrical 3D side of things, and to route the hose, I can just route wires because it's thinking that these hoses are wires, so just route wires. Use the SolidWorks route. I could route it with just 3D sketches. I want to use a spline, and just OK that. And what it's doing, it's basically creating a from to list from the 2D schematics. And it's going to route the hoses where they're supposed to be. So there's the U1s fittings tied together, and there's the U2, and it done it for us automatically. And in fact, these are just hose routes, and I'll talk about this a little bit, I guess. SolidWorks Electrical 3D comes with a limited version of the full routing that's part of SolidWorks Premium. So you have some capabilities in there for this. So I can edit route, and then I can use auto route if you've used the routing inside of SolidWorks Premium. And I want to route it through this clip right here. And now you can kind of see that I got too tight of a bend right here. I'm going to move that back, and I'm going to go ahead and exit out of this, or not exit out, go ahead and complete it. Now I'm going to lose my route because of that minimum bend radius. But what I can do, I can go to this elbow. This elbow happens to have two configurations in it, one at 90 degrees and one at 45 degrees. And now if I go in and edit my route, find it in the tree, and edit route. And now you can see that it's nice and smooth, no tight bends. And go ahead and exit out of the route subassembly. So there's the route. And this would be good in a lot of cases, but if you need make a drawing of the hose assembly, we can't really do it with this. What we need to do is actually make these hose assemblies, in effect, a harness. And then in a harness, we can flatten out the harness into a 2D drawing. So to show you that capabilities, I'm going to delete what I just did. Delete the two hoses that we created. Or actually, I didn't. Get out of it. So now let's delete the hose assemblies like I wanted to earlier. So now the hoses are gone. If I go back to my schematic side of things, and let's see, let's go to, I think it's a process. No, excuse me, it's a project. I've got a couple of harnesses already defined. Got a harness 1 and a harness 2. Now I need to associate on this schematic the components that I want to add or attach to a particular harness. So I'm just going to window select around, and I want to make sure that I do capture the fittings themselves. So I'm going to right click on the line and add remove from harness. And I can see that I do have the U1 and the U1s, the two fittings and the hose. So I'm going to hit my OK button, and I want to associate this or those components to harness 1. Add it to the harness, select, and now I can window select the other hose. Got the components, hit my OK button, and associated this to H2 harness. And I can exit out of the command now. So now these are not just individual components, they're a part of a harness. Now if I go back to SolidWorks, I can route harness. And I'll route all harnesses, or I could individually select them and route them individually. Now, electrical, if you're not familiar with electrical, you can create something called EW paths. It's in effect a 3D sketch. And that 3D sketch is used to route wires, to route them the way you want to and not automatically route them from point A to point B and go through stuff. Here with hoses, I want to continue. I'm going to go ahead and just use the auto route capabilities. And now it's going to create harnesses. And I'm not sure why it did that, but in effect what it did, it switched back to the default configuration of that hose fitting. And now it's doing the second one. So now I've got two harnesses, and I'm going to go ahead and switch this back to the 45 degree, and that way I can then route it back through that clip and it not blow up on me. So I can edit route just like we did before. Select the spline and we'll auto route it, and select that center line on that clip. And you can see I've got a little interferences in there, so I'll just take this point and, well, actually I'll have to go a step farther. And now I can take the point and drag it out to drop it down so it clears. And let's see. To do the flatten the harness, I can go to my electrical tab. And electrical, again, that's kind of what I was talking about a little bit earlier. Electrical is actually part of the routing that's part of SolidWorks Premium. But this electrical also comes with the SolidWorks Electrical 3D. The SolidWorks Electrical 3D does not include the piping and the tubing, so that makes it a little bit awkward when you're trying to create tubes and physical pipes with L-weld elbows and things of that nature. If you don't have the SolidWorks Premium to go along with SolidWorks Electrical 3D. But anyway, electrical, I can flatten the route in the SolidWorks Electrical side of things. And which one do I want to flatten? I'll just flatten that one there. What type of flattened route I want to do? Annotation, basically annotation is where it's not to scale. Manufactured is to scale. And I'll just select that spline. So flatten out that spline. Display 3D connectors. I want to go ahead and add maybe an electrical bomb, a cut list. Maybe I don't want a connector table. And auto balloon it. And OK that. And what it'll do, it'll create a drawing. Here's a warning that I don't have links in the tables. Yeah, go ahead and create it. So there's my tables. And there's a drawing. Another negative about this harness drawing is that you can't really show with these elbows or these 90-degree fittings. Right now it looks like they're aligned with each other, but in reality they may be rotated or they're 90 degrees off of each other. We can't really do that in the electrical side of things. But here's a 2D drawing that you can create from this thing. So here's my hose part number. There's a length. And you'd probably want to use a new bomb template for this, because this is not really a circuit. And here's my two fittings, and there's my one hose and the length of the hose. So that's the 2D drawing side of things for the hose. And I'm going to go back to the top level assembly. And go to my tools, and I want to update my wire cable links to make sure I've got the correct links now for the wires and cables. And I want to do that before I generate my reports. And it'll take a few minutes or a few seconds. And now it's complete. And I can go to my reports inside of the SolidWorks Electrical or inside of SolidWorks 3D, or I could have done it inside of the 2D package. And it's go to reports. The reports here, these are customizable. These are out of the box reports, but anyway, you can see here that I've got hose lists for the harness. So harness 1 needs 19.74 inches of hose. It goes from U1 to U1. Bill of materials. So here's bill of materials. I can generate drawings of these, and I'll just generate drawings of the two. And you can see that it's added those two reports to the documents in the project. So here's my hose bill of material. Harness 1 goes from U1 to U1. Color of the hose is black, and there's the length of the hose. And there's the other report. These are the fittings for the different harnesses. So that is SolidWorks Electrical. Guess we'll now open it up to any questions you might have. So I'll give you a few minutes to ask any questions. And again, I do want to point out that this is SolidWorks Electrical. It's not SolidWorks Hydraulic and Pneumatic, but you can do hydraulic and pneumatic with it. I wouldn't necessarily purchase the product just for routing. Right now I am showing 2015. Everything I showed you could be done in SolidWorks 2014. Electrical has actually been out for some time. It was a third-party, Traceworks, I think was the name of the company that had it, and then SolidWorks purchased it a couple of years ago. I think it became a SolidWorks product, I think in 2013. I may be wrong on that statement, but it's been out for some time now. Any other questions? I'll give you another minute or so for somebody to chime in. Well, SolidWorks Electrical 3D is actually an add-in to SolidWorks. So you do have to have SolidWorks before you can run SolidWorks Electrical 3D. So SolidWorks Electrical 3D is the add-in that communicates with the schematic side of things, pulls the intelligence from the schematic to help you make your electrical side of things easier to work with. Route your wires, route your cables, route your wiring harnesses, route hose, route tubing, route pipe. Also, you can do P&IDs. Somebody's thinking about P&IDs, but you can do a P&ID because in effect a P&ID really is a schematic. You can also combine the schematics, or you can have a project where you've got your electrical your hydraulic and possibly pneumatic, because you may have a pneumatically operated hydraulic valve, a pneumatic pilot on a hydraulic valve. So you can combine all three of them into a project. Okay, so I guess I'll continue on with the presentation. Contacts, again, well, I actually apologize, I didn't say who I was, but I'm Wayne Matus. I'm application engineer with Progression. Wayne at progressiontech.com is my email address, and I'm extension 295. So if you got any questions about electrical, you can shoot me an email or give me a call. If you want to see a demo on electrical, just call Progression Sales extension 1 or go to our webpage, progressiontech.com, and get a demo. And next webinar, next Friday, June 26th, is going to be to go from CAD data to shop floor instructions. Not exactly sure what that's going to be about. I'm assuming it's going to be about SolidWorks Composer, to how to take your SolidWorks models and build instructions, how to put your assemblies together, things of that nature. And that's Friday, June 26th, so next Friday. The following Friday is, I think, July 4th holiday, so we're not going to have one that week, but the following week, following Friday, July 10th, we're going to have one on streamlining your quality control with SolidWorks inspection. So it'll be a presentation on SolidWorks inspection. So that's the end of today's presentation. Thank you for attending and have a great day.